Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on September 27th, 2021 at approximately 6:33 a.m. PST. Well, the original series I was working on, I told you I had a certain amount of things I was dealing with. The last, I should have counted this beforehand, but what the heck. As we know, I don't do things the way I should all the time. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The last 2 weeks, I went over a number of videos in a very specific sequence. During that time, I got asked by a couple of people. There was a request regarding a target topic. So, as I said, I put them on next on the list, and this is where that list comes in real handy. So before I get into this, thank you for joining me. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the alert button to let you know when the next video comes up. Okay, now the reality of it is this: I put this list together of different videos, and during the last 2 weeks, I was talking about a certain set of topics, and there was a reason I put it all together. But before I deal with that, and I'll explain that probably in a day or two, but there was a very definitive reason. During that 2-week period, I had a couple of requests for different video types. And I mentioned they were going to be next on the list. So the first one that hit the list was, and I don't recall off the top of my head, so sorry about that, but somebody asked me to talk about the old gaming systems I used to play. Because as you well know, I still play to this day. I play Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, and with that in mind, when I think back to the games I started playing with, in June of 1976, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. At the time, I was very much an outcast amongst outcasts. As it turned out, I had isolated myself even then from people because I couldn't cope with them. I never did figure out, and I still haven't to this day figured out, whether I don't cope well with people because I understand them or because I don't. That's for somebody else to figure out for the moment. But my brother came home from university, no, I guess he was in college at the time. Came home from college and introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons. Told me he wanted to take me out to this game. He figured that I would enjoy it because I didn't have a social life. I didn't have friends around. So he took me out to a bunch of college friends of his. And this guy, and I don't know what his last name was, I never did remember, but his first name was Doug. He come out, picked my brother and I up at our house. He was driving a little orange 1977 Beetle, Volkswagen Bug. Took us out into the middle of nowhere. Right, a little community outside of Comox where I grew up, into a little community called Black Creek. Right, and we played in the house. The first character I built was a gentleman by the name of Arneson Hardicane. Okay, now I built a dwarf. Okay, I had no idea what I was building. I had no idea how to play the whole 9 yards. Okay, but we built the dwarf. We built the character. They walked me through it, and I couldn't come up with a name. So at the time, Dungeons and Dragons only had one hardcover book. Everything else was paperback. It was all just pamphlets and what have you. So it was very, very disconnected. It was a very primitive setup. Okay. Now, I could have brought that out, and I forgot to. As a matter of fact, I think I'll go do that. So give me half a second. No, I'm not. I will not. Maybe one day I'll bring them out and show you. But in any event, I've still got one of the original dice that I played with. Okay. So with that in mind, we built the character, and Doug, the game master, we were looking for a name, and he grabs hold of the books. And if you look at the original book and the original writers of Dungeons and Dragons, one of the authors, one of the creators was Arneson. The other one, his first name was Arneson. The other one, his last name was Hardicane. That's where the character's name came from. Now, that's one of the game systems I played, but here's where it ties together. This little series here that I've shown you multiple times, I said was a book written by a gamer for gamers. This little book, in the early part of the series, they're in the lead dwarf, one of the, if you will, anchor points that is in there is a gentleman by the name of Arneson Hardicane. I took the character's name from the first book, from the first game I ever played, and turned it into a permanent setup. Okay. Now, I played Dungeons and Dragons. I still to this day play it. I have played, and for those of you that are gamers, okay, as in people that play and that played, your role-playing games. Now, for me, I'm still tabletop. I still use paper. I still use physical dice. And I still use figures. Okay. But while I was playing that, I was introduced to a few other games. Like, I did play something called, what the heck was it called now? I forget the name of that offhand, and probably will by the end of this. But some of the other games I played Shadowrun. Okay, and I really took to Aftermath. Aftermath is where Jeremiah Wollstrom was built. Okay, now Aftermath is a post-apocalyptic game. The first character I built for Aftermath was a character by the name of Xavier Zachariah Zelig. Okay, I have no idea where that name came from, but I'm sure that was partly somebody else's assistance as well. But we built the characters. I played him for a couple of games. Right. And that would have been in we started that in 1981. Okay. So I ended up playing that. Jeremiah Wollstrand is the lead character in the Yldrbac Chronicles. I did play Shadowrun for a while. Okay. Some of the other games, just mentioned briefly, if you will. I did play Villains and Vigilantes, which was a predecessor to a lot of the superhero games that came out. I did get into playing Champions for a while. Again, superheroes. Make your own go round. Basically, it's the same idea. Live life in a world and do your best to make things happen. Okay. I do have in my possession the game system Universe, which was one of the first role-playing games that was put together, from my understanding. Okay, I spent a lot of years playing Traveler. Okay, and today we're playing, what the heck is it called? Starfinder, which is Dungeons and Dragons in outer space. Okay. I also ended up I played a little bit of a game called Paranoia, which isn't really a role-playing game. Okay. Played Paranoia. I played Insomnia. Right, which was really kind of a weird one. Insomnia boiled down to playing a game where you know nothing about your character. Okay, until you're playing the game, and it's done, and the way you find out about your character is by trying things that you've never done. And the game master tells you, okay, you figured out that this is a skill of yours. As you go along, the idea is get to figure out who you are. Kind of like life. You wake up not knowing what your life is, what your skills are, where your real strengths are. So you figure it out by going along and doing things one step at a time. Okay. Now, these are all games. A lot of these are role-playing games. Of course, I played some of the little tabletop games, some of the little box games as well. One of the box games that made a real big impact was Card Wars. Card Wars was a game that really started out, it was a tabletop game. Right, it wasn't a role-playing game. However, I did at one point take the concept of Car Wars and turn it into my own role-playing game and ran a game that way for a number of years. Okay. Where we actually built the characters and had the same idea, with the focus being on cars with weapons. Take a look at Road Warrior, Mad Max, a lot of these games, a lot of these movies. That's where they started. Okay. Now, as I've said, okay, I'm a firm believer that violence has a place in only one of three places: movies, books, imagination, as in, tabletop gaming or video gaming in today's world. Okay. Or in mutually agreed upon, physical contests. Things like, now I don't personally do a whole lot of watching the physical ones. Okay. I don't play a lot of video games either. Primarily because I can't track the things. But the game systems, like this has been over. You keep wanting to call it Omega, and that is not what it was called. I'm really not happy with the fact I don't recall what the name of that one system was. Okay, it came out before Dungeons and Dragons did. Okay, and I cannot for the life of me remember. So what'll probably end up happening is, in one of these videos, hopefully one of the next few, I'll just pop up and go, "Oh, the name of the game that I forgot about was this." So we'll see what happens there. Okay, so I've played a lot of these different games. Okay, and tied a lot of the concepts and many of the characters that I designed in the Yldrbac Chronicles have been playtested, if you will. Many of them have been playtested by me, either as a game master or as a character, as a player. Okay, so I mean, the reality is, this all ties together with this concept of, have I been gaming so long that my imagination has gotten way out of hand, and net result is we end up with this. Okay, Races of the Worlds. It was funny, and it was just a passing comment somebody made to me the other day, that book has given them, and the book, The Races of the Worlds, has given them an idea of something to work on. Right. So we'll see where that goes and if they ever do anything with it. But we'll find out. It was just kind of flattering to have somebody take my book and go, "Gee, I might be able to use that to do this." And no, I'm not going to tell you what it was, because the reality of it is that the individual may be working on it, and I'm not going to give him I'm not going to inadvertently or deliberately set competition up for it. But it does bring to mind the idea that this funny little book here, okay, if it ever gets turned into a novel, that's great. Or into a novel, I think they did that. If it ever gets turned into a movie, that's great. But here's the neat little thing. Okay, the story is getting written anyway. But as I put in my novels, they are any similarity to people I've met or to characters that have been played is entirely deliberate. I've drawn on all of this information. Okay. And, I've drawn on the whole 9 yards in order to construct the concept on how to write. Okay. This is where science fiction and science fantasy comes in. Some of the characters I played, okay, as a matter of fact, I was talking to somebody. There's a character that I built, okay, in one D&D game a while ago, by the name of Arakar Kakari. And one of the gamers I was playing with at the time is running a system. Now, Arakar Kakari was a lizardman. Okay, he was essentially, for those of you that are focusing on alien technology and what have you. Arakar Kakari was a reptilian, but he was a thief like no other. Okay, and he literally, in game time, forged the ownership of an entire city. Okay, he would steal from his own people. Now this is a game. Okay, I am 100% against stealing from people. Okay, you don't take that which is not yours. In a game, playing the thief, being able to do that sort of thing, there's no harm. Okay, nobody gets hurt. Well, your characters do, but a character, as if you're a gamer, as you know, a character is written on paper. It's that simple. Okay, but Arakar Kakari was a consummate thief. He would steal from his own party. Okay, now this does not sound like a very nice chap, and it really wasn't. On the flip side of that, when he forged the ownership of the city, he turned around and he did it by taking a rundown bar, paying top dollar for it, way more than what it was worth, hiring a bunch of people that were living on the streets to work in the bar. So he built the bar, he ran it by people that were down and out. Right. And he went about making sure everybody was content. Everybody was taken care of. There was one bar in particular that he got into, and he bought the place, and he bought a second bar, and he looks at one of the waitresses and goes, "What are you getting paid?" So she tells him, and he looks at it and goes, "Well, that is not going to continue." Well, of course, she thought that meant that she was all of a sudden going to get a pay cut, which is the normal thing that people would do. Only what Arakar did was he went, "Nope, I'm not going to pay." He says, "That's not going to happen." I says, "Don't worry about it. I'm doubling your pay." Right. I am a firm believer that if you're running a business, even in a game system, pay properly so that people are happy to stay. You don't have to give them all your money. If you're paying them a proper amount so they can afford to live and do their thing, they may not stay with you forever, but at least you don't have to worry about them just bailing because they can't afford to stay. So Arakar Kakari is actually a character in the Chronicles. You'll run into him somewhere. But the thing that I got a kick out of was one of the gamers that played when I was running him has built a game for the people he works with, and he took Arakar and set him up as the head of the Thieves Guild. Okay, now Shadowhammer was another character in D&D I played that was, to say the least, a little bit more of a dwarf than normal. Okay, and again, he went about building. One of the common denominators that seems to have developed over the years was I keep ending up in game time building empires. I asked my current game master, I says, "What is it that every character I build tends to go after this incredible empire?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Drive." Well, understand, in today's world, I'm in the process. I've already laid the groundwork out on paper regarding the building of a healing center, of a healing and education center, not one where you go and they pump out a whole pile of medication for you. Medication, to me, it's a stopgap, and it is necessary on occasion. Speaking of which, I am happy to report that I'm not happy about this part. The last couple of weeks I've been slacking off, so my weight's gone back up a little. Okay, but the important thing that I'm very pleased with is after my blood pressure going way up here, and I changed my diet and what have you, even while I'm slacking off on my eating and what have you, my blood pressure and pulse are still absolutely in the safe zone. I'm very happy with that. Okay. Now, the thing with gaming, okay, when you're taking your imagination and building a character and running it through a number of different things, of different scenarios, it teaches you how to respond, how you can respond and get back and get the results you're looking for, which can be translated into life. Because here's the thing. Before I started gaming, right, before 1976, my social skills were atrocious. I would hide from people. I would stay, even when the teachers were trying to get me to go outside when I was in elementary school, I would stay indoors away from people. Okay, it wasn't until 1976. Okay, now in 1976 I was 13. So I learned my ability to socialize with people at a gaming table. Now here's the twisted part. At a gaming table, if you're not happy with somebody, right, you're talking fantasy role playing. Okay. I learned that if you didn't like somebody, you beat them up, you killed them, you stole from them, you set things up so they could have a really bad day. And you went ahead and tried making your life better. Some of the characters you would play, as a good person. Some you would play as a bad person. Well, here's the thing. Over the years, I found I cannot play something called a chaotic evil person, as in somebody that just is outright mean to people. Okay, and outright selfish. Yes, I do some odd things in gaming, but playing a character like that, I tried that one day, and it went so badly for me, I had nightmares for the next 3 days. Okay, so there is a part of yourself when you start role playing. There is a part of yourself that gets infused into those characters. Okay, so I learned my social skills to start with around the gaming table. Where if you didn't like something, breaking the law of a tyrannical government was normal. Okay, so if you didn't like something, you went against it. If you wanted something, you stole it. You worked to figure out how to buy it, etc. Okay, laws were meant to be acknowledged because even as a thief, you couldn't very well break the laws if you didn't know what they were. Okay, life went on. I went through a number of years of gaming. Okay, and then in 1982, 7 years of gaming where that's all the social skill I had. We'd game every weekend. We'd go out to Doug's place, and we would game. Okay, in 1982, I got introduced to a gentleman that was running Aftermath. Okay, and we shifted from D&D to Aftermath. And then I met a gentleman that was he was not a gamer. As a matter of fact, he was actually a member of a bike gang. And much as I could ride a motorcycle, I certainly am not a biker. Okay, a motorcycle was the first thing I learned to ride. But I met this gentleman, and he couldn't wrap his brain around the imagination side of it. But he knew my social skills were non-existent. So he started taking me out for coffee. Right, just for coffee. We'd sit, we'd have coffee, we'd just talk about normal life, which to me, I had no functional knowledge of. Okay, even at that point, I had no functional knowledge of it. So here's the guy he was an ex-arm breaker for a bike gang. Okay, so in his world, if you didn't like somebody, you beat them up, you stole from them, you did whatever you had to. Right. Laws were meant to be acknowledged. Okay. So this is where my social skills came from, to say the least. I didn't exactly learn how to be tactful, how to be how to be socially acceptable in a lot of ways. I mean, don't get me wrong. I live by 3 karmic laws. Be true to yourself first. Do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. Energy out, energy in. And those are still what I govern my living life by. My day-to-day life. That's just the reality of it. So, from that standpoint, okay, it's very much an issue of those are some of the games that I have played over the years. Of course, I did play. I never took to it. I did play things like Monopoly and checkers. Chess I used to play a lot. I haven't played it in years, but I used to be pretty decent at it. About the closest thing to sports I ever played to any functional degree was I played pool, which isn't exactly a sport, I don't think, but that was pretty much it. But as I said, I would cover some of the gaming systems that I went through. Okay. So that being said, that was the important one. That was the first video somebody asked me to deal with. And like I said, I'm trying to keep these down to the half-hour mark. So with that in mind, tomorrow, because the other part of that request was to go over some of the movies that I've watched that I have talked about, go over them a little more in detail and explain what I took out of them and why I look at them. So I will get to that tomorrow. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, stay positive.